Have you ever thought how important faith is for living life? Without faith, we would be nothing. Every day we are navigating life by faith. We drive our cars trusting the other drivers on the road. We drive our cars believing that we'll arrive safely at our destination. Of course, it's not blind faith we exercise. We drive paying attention in case of human error. But overall, we trust the road system. We trust that it will work. In fact, this is true of all aspects of our life. Our human relationships likewise depend on faith, faith in the other. Without faith being exercised, we would not have meaningful relationships with anyone. Furthermore, faith expands our horizons. We step into tomorrow exercising faith. And of course, it is part of our religious system. It's not insignificant that we call it the faith. Faith eclipses stress, anxiety, and fear. Faith helps us explore the future and find solutions. As I said, without faith, we are nothing. We would turn in on ourselves in despair. So faith doesn't simply apply to religious beliefs. It applies to everything we do. Now, some 3,800 years ago, a man and a woman stepped out in faith and left the security of the home, their family, their country. They pioneered a major development in religious understanding. They believed in the Most High God and that the Most High God had called them to go on a journey into the future. They were Abraham and Sarah. Lot, their relation, went with them. They took their families and their herds, their servants, their flocks of sheep and goats. God had called them, and they believed in the promises of God. How bizarre it must have been for their community to see them go, if not for them, leaving the security of their community and their way of life. But Abraham and Sarah, who were childless and had been for quite a while, went, believing in the Most High God, the promises that they would generate a family, a great nation. You see, we get back to what I was talking about a few Sundays ago, that God doesn't call the qualified, God qualifies the called. Abraham and Sarah are a fine example of that truth. Through faith in God, they were qualified. They believed and they were blessed. They believed and they became a blessing to countless people. They bore one son who fathered twin boys, and one of the twins, Jacob, fathered 12 sons. Jacob became Israel. The 12 boys generated the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob and his 12 lads went to Egypt. Their son Joseph had become one of the top civil servants in Pharaoh's kingdom. They liked it so much they stayed. They overstayed because they were comfortable, wealthy and influential. But they stayed so long they became enslaved. So some 400 years later, they finally were liberated under the leadership of Moses and Miriam. And we call that event the Exodus. What is critical in the story is faith. They trusted God, and when their faith was compromised and failure entered their lives, God was there. God proved faithful to them, even though they proved unfaithful at times. It's a rollicking saga, which upholds profound truths about living life and receiving the blessing of God. Our readings make it clear that it is by faith that we enter God's love, which rescues us from our own foolishness and small-mindedness. This rescuing is what we call salvation. We are saved by faith, which is a gift to us from God. Our other reading today tells us how Jesus called Matthew. The call of Matthew is captured brilliantly by the painter, the Renaissance painter Caravaggio. You have a copy of the painting on your order of service. You might want to look at it as I speak. And you will notice that you'll have a small picture at the back of your order of service of feet. They are the bottom right-hand corner of the painting. Now let me explain the painting to you. Caravaggio has depicted the call of Matthew. And Jesus stands there. He is on the far right of the picture, pointing his finger and saying to Matthew, not saying, he may have said, come. And his finger is stretched, hand is stretched out. And Matthew is sitting there, bringing his hand to his chest, saying, so to speak, me? You calling me? Yes, I'm calling you. Now I want you to watch my body. When I would speak to you, I'd speak to you with my whole body facing you. Normally we do that. But Jesus is like this. He's twisted. His feet are pointing away from Matthew. It's a wonderful interpretation of the call of God. God doesn't call us to sit in one place. God doesn't come to sit with us here forever and a day. God calls us to come and follow. God said to Abraham, go. To Matthew, come. What is God saying to us? To you? To me? Have you heard the call, come or go? Or, unlike Matthew and Abraham, you're still thinking about it? Do you feel more secure in your comfortable position? The call of God is challenging. Very much so. Like myself, I struggled with the call of God. It took me 3 months to work through it. I wasn't like Matthew and left the table. I sat pondering it. I had to go and follow and give up my dreams of what a good life would be. Faith allows us to move out and strive for what seems impossible. Faith gives meaning to life, empowers relationships, and builds community. Faith is essential to our wellness, or in the old-fashioned language of the church, faith is essential to our salvation. Matthew's Gospel also tells us about the woman who risked shame in touching a man while she had her menstrual flow. It was taboo to do so in strict Judaism, and I believe it is still so. But she risked the shame because of her faith in Jesus and her great need. Likewise, the synagogue leader risked something in coming publicly to Jesus, this maverick, wandering teacher prophet. But he had faith in Jesus. Neither the woman nor the synagogue leader were disappointed, for both stepped out in faith and were blessed. Like Matthew, they found life in its fullness. My simple message this morning today is based on these texts from Genesis and the Gospel. And it is this, that faith is essential to experiencing the fullness of life, in a general sense as well as in a spiritual sense. We will never have fullness of life unless we trust God. We also need to trust others, and we also need to trust ourselves. Faith is essential to navigating life, and I'm not talking about blind faith. And that hearing and obeying the voice of God that calls us to come and go. That's how we will navigate our Christian life, by hearing God's call to come and go. And by eternal life, which we'll receive, I mean that the heavenly life of meaning, purpose, and deep joy will be ours. I want to end this sermon with a story about the richest man in the valley. It has no author. It's just a story, a gentle, warm way that casts light on the role of faith in life. The story speaks of faith that is well placed, and it speaks of faith that is misplaced. It goes like this. There was a wealthy lord who lived in the Scottish Highlands. He was more than richly endowed with this world's goods, and amongst his vast possessions was a stately mansion overlooking a beautiful valley. But there was a basic emptiness in his life. He had no religious belief, lived alone, and was possessed by his possessions. In the gate lodge at the entrance of his estate lived John, his herdsman and gatekeeper. John was a man of simple faith and deep religious commitment. With his family, he was a regular churchgoer. God's presence was a reality in his home and his life, and the Lord had observed their Christian devotion. One morning, the Lord was looking out on the valley, resplendent in the rising sun, and he was enjoying his estate when he heard the doorbell ring. He was summoned. John wanted to see him. It was important. John came in and he said, "What's the matter, John?" And John looked embarrassed. He said, "I need to talk to you, sir." So he's taken into the study in private. "Sir," he said, I just want to tell you, last night I had a dream. God told me that the richest man in the valley was going to die at midnight. I thought you should know, sir. I felt I should tell you. I hope, sir, you don't mind." "Don't be silly." The Lord said, "I don't believe in dreams. Go back to your work and forget it." John looked uneasy. He said, "This dream, sir, was vivid, and the message was that the richest man in the valley would die at midnight tonight. I just had to come and tell you, sir. I felt you should know." The Lord dismissed him. But John's words bothered him. So much so that he finally drove later that morning into town and asked his local doctor and a friend to give him a checkup. The doctor examined him and pronounced that he could give him another 20 years of life. The Lord of the manor was relieved, and with a bit of lingering doubt, he invited the doctor to dinner. They had a dinner many times. They enjoyed a sumptuous meal and a few drinks, and about 11:30 the doctor got up to leave, and the Lord said, "Why don't you just hang around a bit longer? Let's have another drink." So eventually, after midnight, the doctor left. The Lord felt relieved. He, the richest man in the valley, was still alive, and he chuckled, "That silly John, that silly man and his superstition." And he went off to bed. He had hardly pulled the bedclothes over him when the doorbell rang. He was summoned down, and going down, he found the grief-stricken daughter of the gamekeeper, John, the gatekeeper. "Sir," she said, "Sir, my mother wanted you to know that John died at midnight tonight." And the Lord of the manor froze. He knew now who the richest man of the valley was.